the Prime Minister.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, we've just heard from that great sycophant of billionaires, the leader of both sides,
and we are going to make our country great again.
Okay, it's that time of the week, Thursday afternoon. We have a chat with Mark Latham. Good afternoon, Mr. Latham. How are you?
I'm well, thanks, Brent. How are you going?
Good, thank you. I'm extremely well. Let's start with your cookbook, if we may. My wife and I made your pumpkin soup in your cookbook, the Alan Jones and Mark Latham cookbook, and I've got to tell you, it was absolutely delicious. So thank you for that recipe.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. I was bracing myself for feedback whether it was going to be positive or negative, but that pumpkin soup with the Thai
coconut cream
in there has got a real kick to it. It's lovely.
Beautiful. The only difference we did, we roasted the pumpkin in the oven.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, we roasted the pumpkin in the oven, and it was just beautiful. I had a huge bowl of it last night. I did.
Fantastic. I'll try the roasting technique myself.
So congratulations. It was delightful.
Probably maybe roasting brings out more of the pumpkin taste.
It does, yeah, it does. And if you do it slow and add a bit of those spices on top of the pumpkin when you put it in the oven, it adds to the flavour as well.
Yeah, it's the red curry paste, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's a winner. Okay, I'll go roasting. I might do it for the weekend because it's become soup weather.
It has become soup weather very quickly, yeah. We're going to give away another one. Yes, we've got one left, I think, have we not? Yep, we're going to give away one of your cookbooks today. I think it's our last one.
Thanks for doing that.
We're going to give away. Let's talk about Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party. They've been plunged into a damaging political crisis again with this Senator Brian Burston. He's declared he would support the government's $35.6 billion company tax cuts in a direct challenge to his leader's authority. When I heard this morning, I thought, Is this right? Because I always thought that Burston and Pauline Hanson were fairly close together.
Yeah, well, there's a bit of argy-bargy there. I mean, the thing about Brian Burston, I suppose it's the thing in Pauline Hanson's defence, nobody really thought he could ever be elected. I mean, One Nation came from really the ruins of the past to get 4 Senate spots at the last federal election, the double dissolution. They had 2 in Queensland, 1 New South Wales, and Cullerton from Western Australia, who popped out of the system, and he's been replaced by Giorgio. So these people have arrived on the scene without anyone really knowing much about them, and it's also been chopping and changing with One Nation on corporate tax cuts, because originally they were opposed, and there was apparently some arrangement with the government that was arrived at to support it, and then Pauline Hanson said they were going to oppose them, and now Brian Burston is offering 1 extra vote for the government. But I don't think it's enough to get
over the line.
Across the line.
Yeah.
There's still a couple of votes short in the Senate. So I don't think Burston's intervention will make that much of a difference. And at the end of the day, my advice to the government would be this corporate tax cut is going on like Blue Hills. Don't you think it's just going forever? We've never heard so much about one piece of legislation. It's gone on for nearly 18 months. And I think it's time for the government to say, look, if they can't get it through, put the money into personal income tax relief, which everyone in the Parliament will vote for. And quite frankly, I think your average worker out there needs tax relief more than your big companies.
But it's interesting that there is now some distance between there looks to be some distance now between Brian Burston and Pauline Hanson. Do you think it's going to become a bigger problem?
Well, it may be. It may be a problem. They lost the spot previously occupied by Malcolm Roberts. One Nation was suffering for the dual citizenship problem in the High Court. They lost Malcolm Roberts, and the guy who came in, Fraser Anning, instead of sitting there as One Nation, he immediately became an independent. Maybe Burston will go down that path, and it does weaken the influence of Pauline Hanson in the Senate. So we'll just have to wait and see. It's hard to know if Burston's rebelliousness was a one-off, or this is going to be a regular pattern now and he splits from the party.
Yeah. Watch this space. Roseanne Barr, she's continued her meltdown a day after the sitcom was axed over her racist tweets. This has been such a surprise story, but such a big story in the gossip circles. One of the most successful, if not the most successful US sitcom to have aired in 2018, and with one tweet, bang, the ABC can it.
Yeah, and Channel 10 in Australia has canned it as well. The tweet is obviously completely unacceptable. You wonder why people who've got a successful television show, and she's obviously been paid a lot, she's made a comeback with this Roseanne program, why she would feel the need to be in Twitter, which is a very combative space. People will fire all sorts of allegations. If she sat there reading her Twitter notifications. There'd be lots of negativity fired at her from the left wing of politics. Why she would then get in a battle and put out this slur against the former Obama advisor is very hard to know, but maybe some people are just compulsive Twitter users. But, you know, I tend to think just canning the show like that, couldn't they put her on a last warning? Because it's very unfair on the innocent cast members. You know, there's other people who work on this show, another 6 or 7 frontline actors who are now out of a job because of the stupidity of one person. So it seems very harsh on them.
Plus, it's all the other people behind the scenes, you know. I read a story yesterday, Mike, where they said it was about 100 people that were going to be affected. Their employment was going to be affected either in full or partly by this decision. Yeah,
and in Australia, in terms of using the ape or gorilla term, which is completely unacceptable, Eddie Maguire did it in relation to Adam Goodes and compared him to King Kong, and Eddie's still there with his media empire unfolding in Australia, and Peter Fitzsimons called a black South African security guard a gorilla, and Peter Fitzsimons' media empire is untouched. So in terms of Channel 10 in Australia canning this program, it makes you think, well, you know, they've been pretty harsh on Roseanne, but there's 2 other characters on the Australian media landscape who've you know, got more media outlets than most of us have had hot lunches, and they're unaffected by what they said in the past.
I wonder if another network will pick this up.
Maybe, or it might be in the world of alternative media where we have to watch it on YouTube.
True. Yeah,
you know, it's, she's obviously pretty hard to handle, Roseanne, and may well be a difficult character behind the scenes, and this tweet is not the only reason why they've decided to ditch her. We don't know. But, you know, for people who enjoy the show, they lose out as well. I just think maybe it was an overreaction, and they could have put her on the last warning. I think people would have thought that's fair enough. And she did apologise. You know, Maguire and Fitzsimons here apologised. Roseanne apologised. She's certainly been treated a lot harsher than those other 2 prominent Australian media people.
She has. Now, what's this story today about Victoria? We woke up this morning to find the Victoria Police have admitted that they members basically did 250,000 random breath tests that were fake over the last 5 years.
Yeah, the police blew into the little little whistle container and basically wrote it down in the book like they had actually breath tested someone just to get their quota up. And I think that's the problem with quotas in the police force. They've got to go out there and reach a certain level of testing. I think it's probably better to leave it to the local command on a discretionary basis instead of central office imposing quotas, so some politician can stand up and say, oh, we've breath tested millions of Victorians, blah, blah, blah. And I think the other problem is the nature of the work. I think when people join up to the police service, they don't necessarily think the best part of the job will be standing on the roadside doing breath testing.
Yeah.
And I've got to say to you, Brent, I don't know if you see this where you are in the Hunter Valley, but certainly around Western Sydney, one of the curious aspects in our state with breath testing, there seems to be a lot at 11 a.m. in the morning.
True.
You know, like, is that an attempt to just sort of get the quota up without having to actually find that many drunks? I think if you had to pick a time of day where you minimise the number of drunk drivers that you'd be busting, it'd be 11 a.m, wouldn't it?
Yeah, there's a particular location which I'm thinking of where you will see them at least 2 times a month at about 11 a.m. Yes, yeah, you're right.
It's very curious that it happens that way. Maybe it's a part of the problem that they've seen in Victoria where the police don't like having to reach the quota. They probably think it's a waste of their resources to be so regimented. And maybe we've got the same problem here in New South Wales. I'd love to see the police minister have a look at similar figures in New South Wales. Certainly, you know, breath testing has made a big difference. It's brought down the road toll. You know, I've got kids in the car. Obviously, I don't want drink drivers out there. It's very irresponsible, but perhaps they could target the night time a bit more effectively to actually catch the drunks and get them off the road and improve public safety.
I see the Victorian Transport Accident Commission has suspended the $4 million in annual funding it gives to the police, to the state's police force. They've only suspended it.
Well, it'll be back.
It will.
But I think there's a warning there that all these police forces, they need to be genuine with the breath testing, and if they haven't got officers, you know, you join the police force, that curbside activity is not real. There's an argument to say it's not frontline law enforcement in terms of, you know, arresting people who've committed serious crimes. Maybe it's time to have like a dedicated sub-force that just does the breath testing, you know, like you know, they've farmed out civilians who do the speed checks on the side of the road. Yeah. Maybe it's time to do that, because I think if the police were honest, they'd say, they don't see the RBT as a very rewarding part of their work schedule.
True. We've left some might say the best till last, Barnaby Joyce. What are you going to say this week about Barnaby Joyce?
Well, I've got to check the news feed because the story changes every day, doesn't it? I mean, I mentioned Blue Hills. I mean, this has gone on like a soap opera, the like of which we've never seen in politics. That there's the $150,000 for the Channel 7 program this Sunday. Then he's off for 11 weeks, and is the latest that he's only off for a fortnight now? He's taking paid leave for a fortnight?
That's the latest, although that may change.
It may change in the next couple of hours.
And now it's medical leave with a medical certificate. He applied originally for personal leave. That's what he applied for, but now it's gone back to medical leave. So we made phone calls yesterday to find out if the personal leave was going to be paid for, because if you take 11 weeks and you look at his salary, it's anywhere between about $35,000 and $42,000 on the public purse. So we made several phone calls yesterday to find out exactly what was going on. We got no answers. Everyone was ducking for cover left, right and centre.
Well, I think my understanding is there's no facility in the federal parliament for unpaid leave. Any politician just gets their 52 weeks of pay and that's it, full stop.
Right.
On an annual basis. There is no facility to be unpaid. So I'm expecting it's all paid. And I think the other truth is, unfortunately, Barnaby's become his own worst enemy, because if he's gone off on sort of stress leave, well, I think, you wouldn't need to be too smart to work out taking $150,000 for a TV interview was going to put the spotlight back on you, and that can be stressful. So, he wasn't sick enough to not do the Channel 7 interview. He was healthy enough to collect the $150, and now, paid by the taxpayer, he's going off for a fortnight supposedly stressed out. Well, it all just looks one big mess, and I think the best advice for Barnaby is pull the pin, and at the next election get out of politics and look after your new partner and your son and move on, because there's nothing left for Barnaby in federal politics, and the longer he shoots himself in the foot, the worse it looks.
Some of the headlines I've seen this week, The Crying Game, Barnaby's Baby Bonanza, but I thought one that I liked was Nappy Cash.
Nappy Cash. Well, the truth of Barnaby is that he could have made this story, go away a long time ago by being upfront and honest. But he seems to have the knack of resurrecting the story, don't you think, Brent? Just when you think, that's all gone, that's in the past, he finds a way to resurrect the story, and constantly it's an unhappy ending.
Mark, I read an article when this first came out, and it was basically saying that if he did this, in other words, accept, yes, I'm sorry, what I did was wrong, etc., I apologise to my wife, I apologise to the family, etc., go away, be quiet. There was a chance that he could come back onto the front bench, but that chance has just been blown out of the water.
No, I think the Nappy Cash is the last straw, isn't it? I think within the government they'd see Barnaby as never being a viable proposition to come back to the front bench. So in the seat of New England, he hasn't got much to look forward to, and I think the National Party will have to find a new candidate up there.
If you look back at the whole story, it's just so easy how something can blow up in your face if you handle it the wrong way.
Well, he said it was a private matter, and the next minute he's doing interviews in his kitchenette of his apartment there in Tamworth and Armidale, wherever he lives, and that gets it back on the front page, and then it sort of dies for a week back on the front page. And doing the TV show for Channel 7, obviously $150,000, it's hard to say no.
It is, yeah.
It was always going to blow this thing up as big as ever, and you've got to feel sorry for his partner and the child in particular. The child's obviously got no awareness of any of this. But one day that poor child will be old enough to look it all up on Google, and unfortunately they're going to find a tale of woe, the like of which you wouldn't inflict upon your worst enemy.
Very true.
I feel very sorry for Sebastian, the newborn boy.
Mark Latham, we'll leave it there. It's always good to talk to you. The podcast will be up on the website before you can say Jack Robertson. Have a great weekend. Enjoy your cooking.
Yeah, you too, Brent, and thanks for the tip.
Thanks, mate.
Okay, good on you.
Bye-bye.